All right. Yes, I'm so glad to see my Plymouth Canton people. Shout out to Melanie who shared my workshop link with y'all. Um, Thanks for being here, everybody. We are going to spend some time today thinking about creating a coaching map, which is just my version of saying, like, let's come up with a plan, right? Like, let's get clear on our plan for coaching. What does it really mean? And how can we use it to match and support teacher needs while also doing so in a way that is manageable? Right? I get this. I used to serve at a district level. I served 29 schools with instruction, and some of those schools had multiple instructional leaders that were on my caseload. And so it is so hard sometimes to match and feel like we're doing a good job coaching when we have a giant caseload or when some of those needs are a little bit different, right? So we're kind of told to use a coaching cycle, follow the same kind of framework for every teacher. And what if that's not the match? What if that's not the match for what the teacher needs? So we're going to explore that a little bit today. All right, we are in Buffalo. Hello. That's a Go Bills, right? Go Bills in Buffalo. Sorry, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles or a Carolina Panthers fan. It's not great to be a Carolina Panthers fan lately. So I always revert back to my Eagles days in that case. But we're so glad you're here. And if you have any friends that you want to share this with, we are recording, and so we'll make sure feel free to share it with folks. So I'm Linda. Let's see, are my slides catching up to me? I'm Linda. I am a consultant who has a love of literacy and a love of instructional coaching. I'm now we're at like 19 plus years education experience, so we'll just consider that plus keeping going. But I worked in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and spent a lot of that time coaching and didn't necessarily have all of the training needed to do that well. And so I love thinking about whether our systems are really set up to help coaching go well. Because a lot of times what happens is we hire coaches, we throw them into some training, and then we kind of let them figure it out on their own. And that's not necessarily a system of support that helps everybody do it well. Um, okay, so today's goals, we're going to think about how are we differentiating our support? What does it mean to have teacher learning phases, and how do we use that to guide coaching, as well as use that to help support what is our tiered approach, right, in terms of distributing our coaching caseload and what our support looks like. And then I'm going to try to give us some time to practice sketching this coaching map out and give us a chance to kind of think that through and practice together where you have some support with me. So here's what I want us to think about. Have you ever been to the grocery store and gone shopping without checking your refrigerator or pantry first to make a list? Uh, yep, yep. I think that lands, right? Totally have done that. Probably. I think I like even made a list this weekend and still like didn't do those things. Like still didn't do, right? But like sometimes we just don't have the list with us. We just gotta make the run, right? And what happens when we're there, right? We wander the shelves, maybe aimlessly, or we go down every aisle, kind of looking to be like, do we need that? Do we need that? Did we buy that last time, right? And we kind of pick up what we think we need, right? Um, and so then we get home and we start unpacking our grocery bags, only to realize that we probably picked up duplicates of items that we already have and probably forgot the specific things that we needed for a recipe or something, right? Like probably the reason that we went to the grocery store, but because we didn't have the list, right? It's like, oh, well, guess I'm going to the grocery store again. And so for me, that is kind of like what this coaching map helps us do, right? When we don't have one in place, when we haven't taken time to really develop a clear plan of what our strategic support is going to look like, it's like going to the grocery store without a list. We might be meeting with the same people over and over while we are ignoring others, right? Because some people are a little bit louder than other folks in terms of wanting support, right? Others might be resisting it. Or we might be coaching and not really providing what we need. So we feel like we're not making progress with that work, right? And so we want to be responsive in the work that we do as coaches. And we want to be effective in the work that we do as coaches. And so a coaching map is our grocery list that allows us to ensure that we have everything we need for creating that meal plan that we mapped out, right, for the week, as well as making sure that we're not just being duplicative in the work that we do and we're actually being mindful about how effective we are. Okay, so let's put this into perspective. We're going to kind of ground ourselves in two teacher examples today. And so there's a difference between teachers, right? Even when we're working on the same initiative or the same expectations, right? When we think about school improvement plans, standards that guide our instruction, right? Like there are things that we ask of every teacher. And yet, even within those initiatives, there are going to be different teacher needs, right? So the example that we're using is one that I think many of us may find ourselves doing. We might be asked to support teachers with implementing a new curriculum. Anybody resonate with that? Is that on anybody's caseload or list or expectations for this year? Yeah, right. Many of us are dealing with that. We are often the ones managing the new initiatives, right? And so hopefully this lands today. So we're going to pretend that we are supporting these two teachers. Teacher one, right? They're both on our caseload. Teacher one has previous teaching experience, but is new to our district this year. They are a transfer, right? So it's her first year working with this new curriculum that we've been asked to support implementation of. Teacher two served on the curriculum selection committee and piloted the curriculum last year. So my question for you, and feel free to drop it in the chat or feel free to come off mute. Will we coach these teachers in the same way? I see a no in the chat.
I would say it's not likely because teacher two has already had at least exposure to the curriculum.
Yep. Yep. The needs that they have, right, are probably going to be different, right? The teacher number two has had some practice with the curriculum already. So his knowledge of the curriculum is at a very different level than teacher number one, right? Teacher number one has experience, but teacher number one is new to this curriculum. Make sense? Okay, if you just joined, don't worry. We are just getting started. We are grounding ourselves in thinking about the different needs of teachers, and we're going to use these example teachers today who we have been asked to support with implementing a new curriculum. Teacher number one transferred to the district this year, but has previous experience. Teacher number two served on the curriculum selection committee and piloted the curriculum last year. Okay. So going back to the grocery shopping example, if you just joined, I was explaining that so if we've ever experienced it, sometimes we go to the grocery store without the list, right? And we end up coming home with items that are duplicates of items that we already had, and we forget the things that we actually needed, right? So this coaching map is like the grocery list to ensure that we are getting everything we need at home. So when we think about the way we differentiate instruction for students, right? We consider how are we adjusting the content or the information that we are offering to students. We think about how are we adjusting the process, right? Or the practice that they receive. And then we also think through how are we adjusting the product, right? Or giving them different opportunities to demonstrate their understanding. We can use a similar lens for our coaching work. So, in the grocery shopping example, we can think about before I went to the store, I did not collect all the information I needed to access my trip to the store, right? I hadn't conducted any kind of pre-assessment. I went into the store and I was just assuming that I needed these items off of the shelves, maybe because they looked good, or I remembered, like, yes, we like to have this item in the house, right? But I didn't have a clear picture of what information was needed or what information I already had in place. And then this impacted my practice of going grocery shopping, right? Because I meandered around the store and simply picked up what I thought I needed without any systematic plan, right? I was not really able to develop any kind of plan of practice for going grocery shopping. And then the outcome of this, right? I did not demonstrate any kind of understanding of using a list for grocery shopping. Instead, I came home with items that I either needed or they were duplicates of what I already had. So when we think about this for our example teachers, do they need the same information? Do they need the same practice with the information? And are the same outcomes appropriate for this curriculum implementation? What are your initial thoughts thinking about our teachers and their experience with this curriculum? How does the content that they have or the way that we present our content, what kind of process we use, and what our expectations of in terms of their demonstration of mastery with this, how will that be different? Any initial thoughts?
Again, I think it's just exposure and use. So teacher number two has piloted the curriculum. So he has some experience. So he has more information. He may or may not have a process down yet, but he may have a better idea of what that process would look like. And then teacher number one, who's just transferring into the district, assuming she's not used this curriculum before, is really starting from square one, likely on her own, likely without any training. Yeah, so it's just gonna look very different. So we started a new math program last year in our district.
Yeah,
Didn't have a whole lot of training on it, so it was pretty much my responsibility to, go to YouTube and Google and all this other stuff,
yeah,
to create some sort of training for these teachers. So yeah, I mean, and again, it's still, even though it was a new curriculum, it looked very, very different to the year one teacher than to the year 10 teacher who still had some experience with math teaching. So,
sure. That's exactly right, right? Like everybody might be new to the curriculum and they still will have varying needs based on experience levels, right? Because their schema around instruction will be different. So a teacher with 10 years of experience can make very different connections to something that's new than a teacher who's brand new to putting instruction in place, right? Which could make things more difficult at times, right? Because we might be working on changing some schema or changing some practices or habits, right? Which in and of itself means that our coaching support will need a different approach depending on the person that we support. Thank you, Kimberly, for sharing that connection to your experience. I appreciate it. Any other thoughts before we move away from this slide? This is teeing us up for what's coming. So just giving you a chance to process where you are with this. Okay. So one thing that we can do, this is where I am spending a lot of my time thinking, right? Is spending time thinking about the instructional hierarchy because whether we are working with children or adult learners, there are things that are true about the way that our brain works when it comes to new learning. And so this instructional hierarchy framework was first identified by Herring and Eaton in 1978. meant to connect kind of student performance to instructional actions. But I am finding it so applicable to our coaching work when we start to think about our teachers as going through very similar learning phases. Now, that doesn't mean that we treat our teachers as students, of course, right? But it is helpful to use this lens and think about like where are they in terms of their learning, right? So there are two, three or four phases. Generalization and adaptation are kind of combined. So in the acquisition phase, the learner is not yet accurate with the skill and oftentimes are frustrated by their performance with this skill. Okay, we might have experienced that ourselves, um, right? And then the performance, right, takes effort because they don't yet know how to perform this skill. Nothing is routine. Everything feels hard, right? Everything takes more time too, because we're figuring it out as we go. So the mental load on someone who's in the acquisition phase is pretty high. In the fluency building phase, the learner is accurate, but they are slow with the skill. Um, and their learning is kind of characterized by instructional performance, right? We might not see demonstration of mastery, but we're not seeing the same frustration, right? So we're past that learning dip, right? That many of us go through when we are learning something new. What we also see in the fluency building phase is that the performance of the learner becomes more automatic with this additional practice, right? We see more routine happening, which means there's less errors, right? Things become more accurate and automatic, and it takes less time, right? Because we're like getting in the groove of things. In the generalization and adaptation phases, the learner's accurate, they're fluent, right? And their performance is pretty much at a mastery level. It takes very little effort and has really become automatic. It makes it much easier for the learner in this phase to begin to adapt it to other experiences and make larger connections across their understanding or their schema. Any questions on that? I am very obsessed with the instructional hierarchy currently. It's just, for me, it's so logical, right? Like, and I love logic. I love when things make sense. So if you do anything else with me, we will probably relate it back to the instructional hierarchy because it's just making sense to me. Okay, so let's go back to our teachers, our teacher examples. Where are they in their learning with this new curriculum? What learning phase might we say they are in? Use a number. I have one for acquisition, two for fluency building, and three for generalization and adaptation. Where do we think teacher number one is? Drop it in the chat or hold it up on your hand, whichever you prefer. I'm seeing ones. Yes, I agree. This teacher is in the acquisition phase, new to learning, right? We would not expect this teacher to be proficient with this curriculum yet, right? And we probably can anticipate some frustration as this teacher is implementing this curriculum, right? So we can already be cognizant. If we can identify this teacher's learning phase, we can be cognizant of that as we inform our coaching support. Okay, what about teacher number two? What learning phase do we think teacher number two is in? One, two, or three? Acquisition, fluency building, or generalization and adaptation? Uh-huh, uh-huh. Two on their way to three. Yep, yep, yep. I'm seeing twos. Yes. Well done. Gold stars. I agree. Um, no need to spar here and just figure out our disagreement. I agree. This teacher, right? has some experience, probably is a little bit past the frustrational period, right? And is more accurate, but probably still slow, right, with implementing. So, in terms of expectations on planning time, this teacher might still need more planning time than a teacher who has been doing this curriculum, right, for 3 years, for example. Um, okay, so what does this mean for our support as coaches? Well, we have teacher number one in the acquisition phase, right? They're not accurate with the skill and their performance is described as frustrational. We might find ourselves in a teacher stance because we're working on developing this teacher's accuracy with the skill. Okay. So we have to remember a lot of times as coaches, we are trained to ask a lot of questions, pull the information out of the person that we're coaching, right? But if the information doesn't exist, there's nothing for us to pull out, right? And so everybody will be frustrated if all you're doing to support them is asking them questions about a curriculum they know nothing about, right? So we have to be prepared to recognize that sometimes coaching requires us to move into a teaching stance. So if we've identified that the teacher is in an acquisition learning phase, we know that this is the coaching stance that matches her needs. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you're not coaching, right? It just means you're being responsive to where this teacher is and meeting them where they are. Okay. And then for teacher number two, we said he is working at a fluency level, right? So he's working accurately, probably beyond frustration, but the coaching support might need to be focused on problem solving, examining evidence of their practice, right? We want to see how fluent is this teacher with the routines of this curriculum? Is there an opportunity to work on pacing and no longer take 5 days for one lesson, right? Or are we helping them with their planning routine so that they're developing fluency with that and lessening the amount of time and cognitive load that it takes for them to process? Make sense? Okay. So this chart I pulled it from just so you're aware, it's from my ebook, which is called the Coaching System Assessment Guide, and I'll be telling y'all about that at the end, if you're interested in that. But just so you know where the references are from and why it looks like that. Okay, I am going to encourage us to pull up your copy of the coaching map handout. I'm going to drop a link that will force you to make a copy in the chat if you haven't already made one. But if you did, let's pull it up because we're going to practice. We're going to practice, friends. Time for some we do. And if anybody is having trouble, please tell me so that I can fix your access. Can you drop a ready or say yes in the chat if you're ready for us to start talking about this? Awesome. Okay. Thank you, friends. Okay, so here's this document. It's meant to kind of guide us through these steps. And in step one, what we do is we list all of the teachers that we support. Now, I've already explained I had a giant caseload. I used to support 29 schools, K-12 with instruction, multiple instruction. So like I get it if that even just asking you to list out all of your people feels overwhelming. But listing everyone does matter for this activity because we are also trying to address our capacity as coaches. And sometimes we need to name that we don't have it. We don't have it to be able to support our caseload fully. And so what I encourage us to do in step one is list it, even if it feels overwhelming. And then we will get to the capacity piece. Okay, so do you want a minute to list out your teachers that you support? Okay, Take a moment, drop your teachers in your list. And when you're ready to move on, you can drop a number one in the chat. I'll look for that. Hey, look at that. I remember to continue the recording, friends. Okay, so we just took a moment and we listed all of our teachers down this side, right, of where we can map our current coaching caseload. Oh, sorry, Jill. I was moving on and I hadn't checked in with you. Um, okay, so we have our list of teachers. That's the first part of step one. Of course, I call it step one, and it's actually a multiple, it's a multi-action step. So now it's time for us to start thinking about our teachers' needs. You can see that in the top of the document, I make note of the definitions that I use for these types of support, right? So we have a coaching cycle, a consultation or a consult, and then group support, which might be planning, right? Like grade level planning or other forms of planning, as well as professional development or professional learning sessions, right? Um, and so that's just Linda's way of thinking through three different types of support. If you have a different way, your document is editable, or that can be one of your other forms of support, right? Maybe one of the things that you provide is video support or asynchronous support of some kind, right? And you might list that might be one of your other categories for this fourth column here. Okay. Any questions about my definitions before we think through teacher support? We're okay. Okay, I'm going to use the example of our two teachers, teacher number one and teacher number two, right? Because we can ground ourselves in that. That's a shared example that we can work through together. So teacher number one, if you remember, we said she is in the acquisition learning phase and is in need of building accuracy with the new curriculum, which means she might need more intensive support, right, than some of our other teachers. So I marked both a coaching cycle and group support planning, right, with resources for this teacher. Why? Well, I imagine that this teacher will be part of this is year one, right, of our curriculum. We know that we had a teacher who piloted it and was part of the curriculum, but it's new, right? So there's probably some sort of implementation plan for professional learning around this curriculum. It could be a once and done from the curriculum company. I'm not saying it's great, right? But there's probably some sort of support plan for this new curriculum. So we imagine this new teacher, new to the district teacher, would be a part of that, as well as this teacher would be part of expected to participate in grade level planning, right? Which would center around how are we thinking through our implementation of this curriculum, right? So that's the group support. That's kind of a universal support for these teachers who are implementing this new curriculum, right? So it's expected that that's already going to be in place for everybody. But this teacher might also need coaching cycle support with additional co-planning time and practice with me, right? Her coach. So I need to be able to think through where in her schedule can we be co-planning something or thinking through teaching a new routine, right? Especially as it relates to students, for example. Okay. Now, for teacher number two, he is in the fluency building phase and is in need of practice, right? And developing routines with this new curriculum. So this support that he needs could vary. Could be a coaching cycle, right? Maybe a short one, depending on the needs that we lift for this teacher. But in this case, you'll see that I have both group support because again, that's a universal support, right? This teacher will also be part of this curriculum rollout professional learning plan, right? Albeit maybe it's not great. Um, but they're going to participate in these universal supports. They might need something differentiated during those universal supports because of their experience. Maybe they take on a lead role, right? Because of their experience with the curriculum. But regardless, they're participating in it. But this teacher might also need some opportunities to support, to be with the coach to support the practice and efficiency of what some of those different instructional routines are, right? They might need to problem solve, and it might just be at different times of the year where something is kind of bubbling up for this teacher, which is why I selected consultation as a plan of support for this teacher. Any questions about my decision making for that? Anybody disagree? Feel free. We can think through it. Now, something I want you to think about is this is not set in stone, right? What I might find is in a month or two, teacher number two presents a need that requires more intensive support or a coaching cycle because of the nature of the challenge that this teacher is facing. And likewise, teacher number one might need an intensive coaching cycle at first to engage with a part of the curriculum that feels hard. And then because of her previous experience, I might be able to back off, right? So this is not meant to be my plan for the year, but rather my plan for where we are right now. Okay? All right, so I want you to take a moment and think through two of the teachers that you wrote down. We won't have time to do everybody, just so I can honor our hour. But I want you to take a moment. If you're watching the recording, pause the video and do this for some of your teachers. Based on their learning phase that you think they're in, where might you map your support for them? Take a moment and do that on your chart. Okay, so now we have thought through our own teachers' learning phases, and where we might map our support. Is anything coming up for you that you would like to think through together with the group as far as your support? Did anyone map a coaching cycle for one of their teachers? Okay. What about consultation? Anybody map that? Okay. Any group support? Okay, so we have examples of all three.
Yes. So I mapped at this time three definite coaching cycles,
Mhm.
mostly consultation, and I have about three with group support, given this time of the year.
Yep,
So we've not yet, where our assessment data is coming in.
sure.
And so we have coaching cycles for most of us. If they've not begun now, they're coming in the next couple of weeks. So just from just now, I have about three coaching cycles, definite coaching cycles. A lot of consultation. I know from the consultation, it'll be more specified as to
Mhm.
whether or not we need some more group support or we need some coaching cycles. So
Nice.
that's where I am at this moment.
Awesome. Anyone else want to share? No pressure. Did anyone have anything in the other column? Okay. I always want to leave space for that, right? Because I don't know all of how coaches offer support. Maybe there's something that I don't know about. So always feel free to add something in the other column. Okay. So we have completed step one. We have listed our teachers and thought about their needs. What kind of support would they benefit from? Now we're going to reflect. So we're going to continue this coaching support map process. This is step two on the bottom of the page. So feel free to type your reflection in there. But what this asks us to do is to think about where are we currently? I've mapped out the needs. Am I serving my teachers this way? Right? We want to identify, are there any gaps in my current support to meet the teacher's needs that I've just mapped out? And this gives us an opportunity to kind of reflect on any current gaps. It's not a judgment, it's just information, right? So take a minute and think, are there any gaps between where your current support, what your current, and I recognize it's early in the year, right? But where your current support is, um, are you currently providing this level of support for the teachers that you just named? This could be as easy as a yes or no, and then you could just think about like why. I'm going to move on to the next page, but if you're still typing, keep going. Um, Once we finish reflecting on whether we have gaps, then we start thinking about our capacity, right? We start thinking about our schedule and the amount of time that we have, because probably you also have other responsibilities that are a part of being a coach, right? It's not just, oftentimes, it is not just coaching, even though we are expected to perform as though it is just coaching, right? So, acknowledging that, right, we have to be ready to think about, do we have the capacity to support all of these needs that we just mapped? Is this even possible? Um, and are we willing to flex our support over time, right? Maybe it's not a right now, I can do all of this, but maybe I can make a plan for over time offering this kind of support. Some other things we can think about, right, is do we have teachers who have the same need for a coaching cycle? Is there the same reason we're identifying them for a coaching cycle that we could do some group coach support, right? Some group time together to think through something. I'm thinking about the teacher number one that we said would need a coaching cycle in addition to group PD. Maybe there is some group coaching happening, some additional co-planning happening with a group of teachers for this new curriculum. We might also think about maybe they need a coaching cycle at the moment, and then we back off that intensive support, freeing up our own time and expecting that teacher to continue some of that practice, right? Build some fluency with that thing that we were building their accuracy around. Because if we do that, it frees up our time to maybe dive into a more intensive coaching cycle with another teacher. Okay. So this helps us start to make a match between what does our capacity entail and how are we then serving our teachers' needs given that capacity. Notice how we started with teacher needs first. Like, let's get clear on that, right? But also that we can't ignore our lives as coaches. We can't expect ourselves to do more than we have the capacity for. Anybody want time to reflect on this? This is sometimes hard. So you may need more than like 5 minutes today to think through it. Once you get into step 4, this is about how are we communicating the plan we just mapped? Okay. Here's what happens, right? A lot of times we as coaches, we develop this plan. We're like, oh, this teacher needs a coaching cycle, right? And maybe today we identified some consultative support, right? We can't coach without engaging the teachers in coaching. And so we have to think about how are we talking to them? No problem, Jill. Um, how are we talking to them about how we would like to support them? Is it an invitation? Are you expected to have opt-in, right? Are you expected to have all teachers working with you? And now we're just laying out our plan of support. We want to be thinking about how are we clearly communicating this with the people that we're supporting, both with the people we're supporting and some of the others too, right? Like, hey, I'm in a coaching cycle right now with so-and-so, but I have you teed up next. Like, I haven't forgotten you. There is a plan of support for you. So this is an important part of this coaching map. We have to make sure that we're being transparent about what our coaching work entails. And so there's space for reflection and some guiding questions about how might you do that. For example, is it an office hours time that you schedule for teachers? Do they sign up for a time with you? Do you reach out to them every so often if they're in the consultation, for example? Okay, so I want to give us some time to think through some key takeaways and invite you to take some action today. Would you like to share something that you learned or something that affirmed your previous learning today? Feel free to drop it in the chat or come off mute. Or if you have a question.
I think a key frustration for me, and I know for Danielle, because we work in the same building, is time and other people's respect of our schedule,
Yep,
shall we say.
yep,
Because I know for me and for Danielle, we spent the first 10 days of school not coaching, but finding material around the building in many different places, unboxing it, inventorying it, and passing it out
yep,
when our teachers needed us to be in the classroom.
sure.
And it's difficult sometimes to ask for that respect from the person who is your boss.
Oh, yeah.
So I think here, having this clearly outlined, like what some of these expectations are, it's like a document that I can go back and say, hey, you know what? I can't do that today because this is what I'm doing. So I think that this document is really important for me to lay out and to see, and for myself too, to see who needs what and how I'm going to go about doing that, but also a document for my admin to say, look, this is why I can't do this, whatever it is you want me to do today, because this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love that. It might also be like, sure, I can do that. Here's what will happen here's what's not going to happen as a result of that. Like, here's what that's replacing. Are we okay with that? Right? Are we okay with not having some coaching results this week because I'm not present? Right? It just, now you have something to talk about. Yeah, I love that. Any other thoughts? Yes, the ability to breathe. Let's simplify, right? Who needs what? How am I giving it to them? Can I do it? I love it. Okay, I want to leave you with an action item. So the process that are we okay with not having some coaching results? Yeah, like you hired me to do this, right? Here's what's going to happen when I'm not present in classrooms. Here's what's going to happen when I'm not able to co-plan with teachers. Here's what happens when the teachers have to find the time to coach with me. They have to give up their own time, right? Like when we don't build time for coaching into master schedules, guess what doesn't happen? Coaching, right? Hey, friends, it's a system, right? Okay, my action item for you today. This is what we did today. This is actually a process that you can do for flexible planning of your coaching every 2 to 3 months or even every month, right? So you can be flexible with what your coaching support map looks like. And I encourage you, if you did not get to a place where you're kind of finished today, number one, I encourage you to set up a meeting with yourself for the next week so that you can finish your current coaching map, right? Figure out your current coaching landscape, design a plan, and schedule another meeting with yourself in 2 to 3 months so you can do this again. Because I guarantee that your teacher's learning phases will have changed, or you'll be supporting someone who maybe you thought was in a particular learning phase and over time learned that they actually were in a different one and you need to adjust what your support looks like. Schedule the time, friends. Taking 30 minutes to work on this will give you so much clarity in what your support looks like, and might even support some really helpful conversations so that you can coach well. Do we need a minute to calendar ourselves? Are we okay? Are you going to do it? Are we going to do I need to coach you and send a follow-up and check in and be like, hey friend, did you do that? I might be prepared. Okay, last things, we're going to close. These two indicators are in my coaching system assessment, which is free. And it gets us thinking about some of these other factors, right? Like I mentioned, like coaching time is a part of the master schedule. That's one of the indicators on this assessment, right? But the connections to indicators in my coaching assessment today are thinking about how are we offering differentiated support based on teachers' needs, right? We clearly mapped that today. And the coach to teacher caseload is manageable. Sometimes who is on our caseload or the number of teachers on our caseload is out of our control, right? But we can use this coaching support map to help us make it feel more manageable so that we have a support plan of action. And I'll make sure I'll be attaching that in my follow-up email. So you'll get it. Don't worry about the QR code or anything. I'll get that to you. I also mentioned that this chart was from the Coaching System Assessment Guide. So this is kind of a companion ebook to the free Coaching System Assessment. And so this goes a lot deeper in thinking about the instructional hierarchy. What does this mean when they're in the learning phase? What is the coaching stance? As well as all of the other indicators that are in the coaching system assessment. So if you take a look at the coaching system assessment, you're like, man, I really wish I could go deeper. There's an ebook for that. So I encourage you to think about that. It's available on my website, which is just lindaryanconsulting.com. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested. And then last but not least, there are tons of ways to connect. If you're here, we're probably already connected, but if you're checking out the recording, we may not be. And so I invite you to connect with me in whatever way suits you. I do also do a monthly newsletter, and this month's newsletter will drop tomorrow. It's written for literacy leaders, so it does often have a literacy lens, but I often infuse information that will apply to all content areas. Like this month, we're thinking about cognitive load theory, which pairs really well with what we talked about today. And so I invite you to sign up for that. It comes out once a month, and I every once in a while send a little bit more information, but I don't spam emails and inboxes, don't worry. And then if you have any questions and you want to sync calendars, I invite you to sign up for a time. October's a little bit bonkers for me, I admit, so there might not be a lot of space on there. But if you find yourself with additional follow-up questions, I invite you to sign up for a time or send me an email. It's just me behind the email. And so I'm always happy to answer questions. All right, I'm going to stop the recording and I'm happy to hang on for another few minutes